Within the space of 7 days, the positivity that came from the win over Tottenham in the capital has completely dissolved. Once again, we saw the defensive side of Leicester City's game riddled with mistakes, chance for the exit of the director of football, unable to create meaningful chances in the final third, and to top it all off, returning to the relegation zone with now just 14 games remaining. It is astonishing that already they haven't been cut adrift, such is the level at the bottom of the Premier League this season. But with still just one player brought in during this transfer window, it has left the squad without the necessary reinforcements required. A squad which, on the basis of recent performances, has looked lacking in quality for a side wanting to stay in the Premier League. I'm Owynn Palmer-Atkin, joined on the show today by former Foxes winger Matt Piper and our voice from the stands, Paul Sherwood. Pipes, let's start with that defeat away at Everton on match day 24. How do you look back on that one?
I was going to say, do we have to? To me, it was a little bit of a shock. I've got to be honest. You know, after the Tottenham game and the way that we played, especially second half, and the way that they bounced back from adversity of going one down, I thought we'd seen something sort of new under Ruud, and something that was a development that we haven't seen yet this season. And I think, I don't know if I'm talking for a lot of the fans, but I think, you know, a few people felt like that. You know, I thought we'd go into the game pretty confidently. Yes, Everton have got David Moyes back in there. But yeah, it was a shock. I mean, it's a total shock. And it would have been for the players to be one down after 10 seconds.
Well, to lose a game, this may sound harsh, but to lose a game in 10 seconds, which inevitably in the end is true, is quite something.
Well, this is what I mean. This is why it was a shock. Because when you go one down at Tottenham, you know, Tottenham are a different outfit completely to Everton. You go one down and you show how you can come back into the game. They had resilience. We've seen it sort of last weekend. You know, they came back into the game. Their heads didn't drop. They were working for each other. They looked like a team. You go one down the week after, and it was like, this is not our afternoon. We might as well all pack up and go home now. That sort of, you know, I watched most of the game. You've seen it in the body language, and they didn't look like a team. And that's what's so disappointing. And that's where I say the shock comes from, because the inconsistency that they're showing from one week to the next is quite something. And yeah, it was a dreadful afternoon.
I asked Ruud van Nistelrooy how fixable what he saw was, not only from a defensive standpoint, but just from the performance as a whole. Where do you stand on that, if I was to throw that question your way, about how fixable this is for Leicester City?
Well, the way that I would answer that question is saying it's dependent on the attitude of the players. Because in a performance like what I've seen at the weekend, forget tactics. You know, you have to start talking about desire, motivation, and it was all gone after 10 seconds. And unless you can, that would be my start point. That's where we need to start. Forget the tactics, forget sort of changing the system. There's two things that managers do when you see a performance like that. You've either got to appeal to the emotions, and we're talking motivation, desire, because it was totally lacking. There was none of it there. Or you bring in new personnel. Now we're what? We're 4 or 5 hours away from the end of the January transfer window. Doesn't look like much is going to happen. So you have to appeal to the emotional side and try and get that sorted first, and then you can start to build on it. Because if you've not got players that want to wear the shirt, because that's what we've seen again at the weekend, we can get sick to the back teeth of talking about it. And I feel like a little bit of a broken record for continuously talking about and using that phrase of wanting to wear the shirt. But most of them players at the weekend didn't look like they wanted to wear the shirt. So that has to be the start point. And if you don't want to wear the shirt, and we haven't signed any players in the transfer window, he's got to look deeper into his squad, I think.
All the latest on the transfer window to come a little bit later in the show. Paul, what did you make to Saturday?
Embarrassing, and I think it starts. You've got to start asking the questions of the manager now. I mean, it sounds crazy, doesn't it? But Pyatt's just said there, forget tactics and forget that. It's about desire and motivation. You know, David Moyes has gone into Everton, who were absolutely useless, couldn't score for toffee, ironically, and now scoring goals. Motivation. They were a motivated team. Pound for pound, I think Leicester City are a better team than Everton. They had players. They had a young right back playing for him, hardly played any games. The lad on the wing played, a handful of games for them. Beto, whatever you want to call him, up front. Useless, apart from when he plays us, obviously. Decore does nothing in any games apart from when he plays us. Well, why? So, I'm sorry, pound for pound, I think we're a better team. You've got to start to look at how are they being organised. 8 defeats in 9. How is this team being organised and set up to play? Because 4-0 at Everton is an atrocious result. That's what it is. It's truly embarrassing.
When you look back on your emotions from Saturday, when that goal goes in after 10 seconds, and then what happens over the next 90 minutes, including that late goal, which was, that is embarrassing. But is it anger? Is it embarrassment? Is it disappointment? Is it resignation now?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of the fan base. There's a lot of resignation. I think this has got all the ingredients and a nice recipe and a mixing up towards relegation at the moment. There's anger in the stands. There's protests planned. There's a team that doesn't look like it cares less. There's a manager who stands on the sideline, and we all want it to work for him. I really do, but he looks a lonely figure. Maybe he's the right manager at the wrong time, but we just don't seem to have that fight. You can't go into any game now and go, do you know what, I think we'll get something out of this. You just don't know what you're going to get, apart from pretty much you're going to concede 2 goals in every game. You know that.
Pipes, the wrong manager, the right manager even at the wrong time, is... I wonder where you stand with Ruud van Nistelrooy at the moment, because there is only so long, as Paul rightly points out, that after 6, 7, 8 losses in 9 games, where you have to look to work out where the problem is. Is it the players? Is it the manager? Is it something else in the club? What is the problem? And everything needs analysing at this point. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, the way that you would, the easiest way to do it is look at someone like Everton, like Paul's already said. They were dreadful to start the season. They didn't really bring any new players in along with David Moyes. David Moyes comes in and all of a sudden, their fortunes change. Now, what is David Moyes renowned for? It's about making everyone, work hard to want to wear the shirt, run harder than, any other team, work together as a collective. You wouldn't look at David Moyes and say, tell me his attributes as a manager. It's about the team. It's about that desire to wear the shirt, the passion. So, maybe Ruud is lacking in that department, and that's obviously what we need most of at this point in the season. Because when you go a goal behind, and after 10 seconds, and then literally, everyone that I spoke to, everything that I saw, the body language and everything, the game was over. You could sort of tell, and then it was definitely done, 5 minutes later when they scored the second. And it's those elements, actually, of David Moyes is probably the reason why he fits and has had success at clubs like Everton and West Ham and places like that, rather than his stint at Manchester United, where all of the resources are there and it's about the tactical nuances at the top end of the game, rather than bridging that financial gap of what you can spend on players at a side like Everton to kind of get them playing and get them in a position where they can win points. The opposite side of the argument, Paul, for Ruud van Nistelrooy is that you look at the way that the side started and defended every single goal, and there are individual mistakes that you can go, that is an individual mistake there's a mistake there's a mistake there, and that formation, style and preparation
cannot can legislate for mistakes like that.
Where does that come from? I mean, people are always saying how bad our defence is. We've got a dreadful defence, but I think 3 of them and the goalkeeper are all internationals. You know, Faye's a Belgium international. He plays. Vestergaard plays. Christensen plays. And the goalkeeper, most people will say, is one of the best in the Premier League. So I don't accept that our defence is that bad. But it is. It really is. But why? Is it being set up wrong? Yes, they're making individual mistakes, but is that because we're not defending further up the pitch better and they're being put under too much pressure at the back? I don't know the answer because I'm not a football manager, but I do know that those defenders we've got play for international teams, and that does not make them bad. So something else is making them bad.
It brings us on nicely to the defensive side of Leicester's game, and I say defensive side of the game, Pipes, rather than the back four, because it's very simple to look at, as Paul rightly said, you know, they are all international players, but there are lines of attackers and midfielders before there. How do you assess the way in which Leicester line up defensively at the moment? Could this be just a partnership thing that doesn't work?
No, I mean, if you look at the team, I think, you know, Rude's got to have a look at himself in, you know, I could talk about the players and not having the desire and lost the game after 10 seconds, but the way that he set the team up, what have I been saying about Vestergaard for 3 years? Unbelievable on the ball, even when we didn't play even when he didn't play for us, when he was at other clubs, unbelievable on the ball. We'll shift that ball through sort of lines and midfield. He's great for that. What he's not great at is defending in behind because he hasn't got any pace. Now, the goals that I saw, they were so high in the pitch. You've got a guy that goes wandering and he's out of position a lot in Wout-Faes. And then you've got a guy who can't defend in behind. So you cannot, I don't think, play Premier League football, even against Beto. Paul highlighted it earlier. He's been awful since he's been at Everton. And then all of a sudden he turns up and he's world class. No, that's because you've gave him 60 yards to run in behind. I couldn't believe it. When the first goal went in, I was not even at the TV. I was making a cup of tea and then I was coming back and my phone went, it went Everton 1-0. I was like, what? Like one of the quickest goals in Premier League history. And when I saw it, it's just one massive boot up the pitch from Jordan Pickford. No one goes to, engage, defend it first. It bounces, it's over the top, and then Vestergaard's in a race. There's only ever one winner. So for me, tactically, he got things wrong. And then you looked at some of the other goals. I mean, the fourth goal was a calamity. We don't even need to analyse that. You know, it was a crazy goal to give away. But, you know, the other two, the first one's a big punt up the pitch. The other two, the defending in front was really poor from the midfielders. There was way too much room, not following runners. And so it's a mix of a whole lot. And, you know, and that's why I said, I think what can happen in football at times is when you see multiple problems. So we're seeing like players not seem to be motivated enough, don't have the desire and the passion. Tactically, we're getting it wrong. Individual mistakes. All of a sudden, when you try and fix everything, it becomes all too much and you don't end up fixing anything. That's why I would start with players. They're going to give me everything out on the pitch, regardless of if I'm pulling 2 under-18s out of the under-18s and giving them an opportunity. If we're not going to sign any players, that's what he has to do. He has to look at his bench. I mean, who's on the bench that he's not giving much of an opportunity to at the minute?
Well, defensively, you can look
anywhere. After a performance like that, I'd be looking at everywhere.
Well, Mavididi has been pulled out of the side. Cody hasn't really had too much of a shout other than those first few games under Ruud van Nistelrooy. Okoli seems to be nowhere near it. Edouard is missing in action.
Listen,
Buonanotte has been left out.
Well, this is what Ruud's got to do. As limited as it is, but my advice to Ruud is, you know, it's the old age saying, if you don't change anything, nothing will change. You know, we've spoke about it so many times. It's probably a bit of a cliche saying now, but it's so true. Now, that performance that we saw at the weekend, he's got to change something.
You mentioned Beto, and one of the reasons that I want to kind of bring this up here is that it was so plainly obvious, even to me doing my matchday notes ahead of the game, who was going to be the striker for Everton on Saturday, with 3 of the other senior strikers, including Brozier and Dominic Calvert-Lewin, all injured, all out for a sustained period of time, that Beto was the only fit striker, and it would probably be him. What are his strengths? And whilst he's been poor this season, big guy, can deal with pressure from physical centre-halves, but also running in behind is probably his strength. And we saw that in plentiful amounts on Saturday afternoon. I was expecting Caleb Okoli to be in the team, because I thought, as much as there may be, an opportunity for Beto to play, the best central defender to deal with his attributes is probably Caleb Okoli, physicality and pace-wise. He's probably the only defender with real pace in the team. Was it... I just wonder, from a selection point of view from Ruud van Nistelrooy, what actually you think was happening there. Because is it a case of this team played really well, this back four played really well against Spurs, and therefore this is the back four that gets selected? Or should he have actually looked at the way in which Everton were going to line up and actually go, right, they're going to play Beto, if we need a centre-half that can deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways that you could do it. There would have been an element of his thinking that this is the back four that started against Tottenham, did really well, so I'm going to put them in. Another way to do it, you don't have to change anyone in the back line to accommodate for someone like Beto's strengths. You can either play in a different way, or you can, tactically you can play deeper. I think what Ruud's done is stop it at source. No balls go over the top. So the way that you do it, if you want to play Vestergaard and Wout Faes, and you're not going to play deep, you're going to play a high line, you've got to stop the ball at source. So the press has got to be really tight, really aggressive at the top end of the pitch, because if they've got any time, they can play it over the top. The other thing that you would do, if they do get that ball in the air, at least one of the midfielders, in my mind, Samare, has got to be running past the defence, because if they don't head the ball and someone gets in, Samare's tracking the run. But none of that seemed the case, and that's why I couldn't really work out the game plan of the goals that I saw.
Paul, the defensive side of Leicester's game has been a thorn in their side all season. It's actually 30 goals conceded since Ruud van Nistelrooy took over, and not any clean sheet in any competition since the 5th of October. That was the 1-0 win over Bournemouth. It is a real problem, and we're not, again, just talking about the back four here, just defensively as a unit. It has been a real poor element of the way that Leicester have defended, not just under Ruud van Nistelrooy, but also under Steve Cooper as well.
I think some of that comes with the confidence, doesn't it? Because, when that goal went in after 9 seconds and a team with no confidence, that just knocks you for 6. It really does. You think, well, here we go, we can do nothing. So that doesn't help, but I still go back to the tactics, and I still question the tactics. We put the same team out as Tottenham, and it was pretty apparent early doors that Decordova-Reid didn't have the pace to beat his fullback, so that had stopped up there. There was nothing coming out of Ayew's side as well, so literally the ball was coming back on us far too many times, and it needed identifying to get Mavididi in, to get some pace or something onto the wings to give the outlet, and all we're doing is we're just welcoming them back in, because we're losing the ball in 3/4 of the way up the pitch, which means we're not getting chances, but also they're retaining the ball and then coming straight back at us. So we've got too much work to do. So I just think tactically we got it wrong.
That won't be the only time that tactical element
It's happened time and again, though.
That hasn't worked.
Yeah.
What is the way to fix this in your view?
Well, I mean, look, that's the problem. That's the problem. It's the manager's job, isn't it? And you've got to look at what they do. And I can't see that we're tactically very clever at the moment as a coaching staff. They don't seem to be switched on to that. And we've picked that team because it did well at Spurs. But Spurs, they've got Son and people like, they're totally different. Beto, like you say, big guy. It doesn't take much as even a fan to go, they're a different proposition. We knew that Moyes would have them running all day long. We knew there'd be some long balls in. We knew there'd be a bit of pressure. Have we set up to do that? Have we set up with pace up front to get back at them quickly? No, we've set up with slow legs up front and given the ball back. So I just don't think this is the question that I've got really, and the point is Van Nistelrooy tactically aware enough for a team in this position? If you gave him a team like Bournemouth or someone like that who's near the top, or Brentford, whatever, maybe he'd be great. But this team needs something different. We're in a relegation battle. And the fact we're still in it, you mentioned earlier, is incredible. And it's going to be criminal if we go down, because the other teams are so bad. And really, we should be staying up. But already, it's down to 4, isn't it? Everton and Tottenham are away from that. And we just can't seem to pull away. And it really will be a sad situation if we go down this year, because it feels like we could stop that.
Pipes, I'm going to throw Paul's question that he kind of put out there to the world almost there, hoping that an answer might just fall in his lap. And I wonder whether you could give him that answer. Is the tactical element, I guess, of Ruud van Nistelrooy for you?
If it was me, I'd be trying everything, and on that list would be. I'm a little bit crazy like this. I do this, especially with football. I was sitting today and I was thinking, what would you do if you was in Ruud's position? Your players aren't running or seem to, the confidence is really low in the group, and the fans have to air their frustrations, of course, and I get that, especially in a situation like this. But we have to be honest, that's not going to help. That's not going to think, they're booing me, so I'm going to run harder, I'm going to try more. That doesn't go on generally in the mind. But I'm not saying that it's wrong what the fans are doing. You have to air your frustrations, especially at a time like this. But what I would do, I'd look back in recent history and I'd say, has there been a situation like this that a team has got out before, but you've got a prime example in Leicester? And that we signed Robert Huth in that when it was really bad, and he came in and he sort of, not single-handedly, but the group came together and, you saw his desire. That then bled into the stands, and then the crowd were back on side, and then we went on to have that, wonderful escape. I don't think he's doing anything at the minute. I'd be plucking players like that, but you can't have too big of an ego, because you don't want the group to think you're going back to the past and you don't know what you're doing. But I would be getting people like Robert Huth to come in, work with my 2 centre-backs, work with the back line, tell some of the stories from, when he came in and he turned things around at Leicester City. Wes Morgan, I know he's at Forest now, but I would be using everything that I could if you want to stay in the Premier League. Because the only other way I know of doing it is you either sack the manager, you change the hierarchy at the football club, but that's not an immediate fix. That's more of a long-term thing. Or you bring in new players in the first opportunity you get, which is the January transfer window. Well, we're now 4.5 hours away. It's counting down, Owynn. We still haven't signed anyone. So when you've got them options no longer available to you, if you want to stay in the Premier League, you got to think outside the box and try something differently. And that would be one of the things that I would do.
I just imagine that moment where Ruud van Nistelrooy gets Robert Huth into the room, just says, look, Robert, just it's a paperwork thing. Just sign here on the dotted line, and we'll just get you doing some work with the back four. Yeah, it'll sign. Yeah, get your boots on, Robert. You're playing at the weekend, mate.
and then outside in training, he beats Vestergaard to a ball, and he's been retired 4 years.
Longer, I think.
When You're Smiling, a Leicester City podcast with Owynn Palmer-Atkin.
Now, what we have seen continue to grow at the football club is fan frustration, not only at performances and the place in the table, but also the general day-to-day running of the football club, the business side of the club, that has seen the Foxes have quite a dramatic fall, really, from what was once seen as one of the best run clubs in the country, perhaps even Europe and even the world. And with talks of, as Pipes already mentioned, of protests against the hierarchy of the football club to come over the next few weeks, the taste continues to be sour. Now, we will have a show coming soon looking at the state of Leicester City and those issues put at the football club's door. So make sure you keep a close eye on When You're Smiling for that one. But let's move on and talk the January transfer window. There is just a few hours until the 11 o'clock deadline, with the Foxes bringing in just one player during the window so far in Wuyo Koulibaly, and outgoings for Tom Cannon on a permanent deal to Sheffield United, as well as loans for Hamza Chowdhury, Brandon Cover, Ben Grist and Will Alves to Cardiff, as revealed to us by Ruud van Nistelrooy on Saturday. Now, Alves completed that move earlier today and told us at the back end of last year that his aim in 2025 was to play as many minutes as possible in senior football.
I think just continuing with the confidence that I have to play, and also, just want to keep on getting as many minutes as I can, because the more I play with all the players, the more I improve every single day, and just learning from them, and also just trying to play men's football as much as possible, whether that's here or on loan. But I'm just excited for next year as well.
My understanding on this January transfer window for Leicester is that any incomings before the deadline is unlikely. There was money to spend in this window, boosted by the sale of Tom Cannon, and that the Foxes do have targets, but what cash is available isn't enough to properly improve the squad compared to the players that are already at the club, hence the lack of activity. The reason behind maybe the lack of spending or going over what the club currently have in the bank is a continuing concern around the profitability and sustainability rules, which allows Premier League clubs to lose up to £105 million over a 3-year period, with those rules set to change in the summer to closer mirror UEFA's own version. Here is what Ruud van Nistelrooy told us on Saturday about the transfer window and the work currently being done by the club.
Everybody's working to add some players that can strengthen the squad, but we also know within the possibilities of the club, so we'll keep doing so until the end. But it's not about transfers coming in; it's about doing better with the players we have, and we can definitely do better.
On the rumours and stories that have circulated today, Cody in a swap deal to Wolves for Craig Dawson is not something that is happening. Casey McAteer is the subject of interest from Sunderland, but reported fees perhaps a little higher than the actual bids received by the football club. Pipes, firstly, how do you look back on the January transfer window? As you keep mentioning, you've literally spent the entire show looking at the clock, watching it tick down to 11 p.m. But how do you look back more generally at the transfer window for the football club?
Yeah, well, it's disappointing, isn't it? And I caveat that with, we don't know about this PSR. We just don't do it. I mean, not so long ago, we sort of really got after the club for. I can't remember when it was, but we really got after the club for sort of overspending and being sort of a bit gung-ho with finances that got us into deep water previously. And, that's probably made them overly cautious. But as I say, we don't know. So, I go after the club now and start saying we needed reinforcements. But if bringing in those reinforcements did take us into PSR, that's something else we'd beat the club with at a later date. Do you know what I mean? So, we just don't know.
Would you not say that they did go a little gung-ho in the summer with a deal worth £25 million plus wages for Oliver Skipp, who hasn't really affected the first 11? Bobby D. Cordova-Reid brought in, he was offered a 2-year contract by Fulham, offered 3 by Leicester, and hasn't really affected the starting 11. Actually, the signing that received the most criticism in Jordan Ayew has probably arguably been the most successful out of them all. But there is a lot of money you would expect by 3 Premier League players being taken up by wages. I don't imagine that any of them are on less than 50, maybe 60 grand a week. And the amount of money spent across all 3 deals is pretty significant.
Yeah, it is. I think they moved away from the model this summer, though. I think if you look at the players that they brought in, we were always sort of led to believe and saw it with our own eyes that, that sort of young, exciting, between sort of 22 and 28 years old, maybe not have realised his potential yet. With good coaching, could possibly do it at this football club. So then could become a future, asset for sale. It's a great model, and we sort of moved away from it under Brendan. We've tried to go back to it sort of early part of Enzo, and a lot of these signings to me looked like, well, it was just not the model, was it? And I don't understand that model, if I'm honest. Skip, and it's all right me now talking in hindsight, but because it's easy for us all to talk now in hindsight that they've not really worked, because Skip could have come in and possibly done well, but he hasn't. So it makes it easier to talk like this now, but it's better to concentrate, I think, on the model. And what the club did this summer, I don't quite understand it. A lot of aging players. Maybe the transfer kitty wasn't big enough to go and get the absolute player you wanted. So you thought, let's get an aging one that has done it in the Premier League previously. Because other than Skip, the other 2-3 have had good Premier League careers, and that's probably the thinking, but it was very short-term based, probably to try and keep us in the Premier League this year, which hasn't happened. So now we're looking at the hierarchy again, obviously.
I know the signing for, and I say with a caveat for Bobby De Cordova-Reid that he has played some real important moments in the time that he has been at the football club. That equaliser against Brighton, Ruud van Nistelrooy's second game in charge. He started the first couple of games of the season, where obviously Leicester drew against Spurs as well, and got two assists against Tottenham last weekend. Jordan Ayew, whilst there was concern around the goals that he'd scored in all those games for Crystal Palace, you kind of could understand at the time with him, with Mark Albrighton leaving the football club, continue to have that older guy around, especially with Abdul Fattawi both being Ghana internationals. Maybe you could make a case for that. But Paul, I can imagine that you are immensely disappointed with this window, and it does when you go through a transfer window like this make you question the season windows of the summer and the winter.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't, because they obviously said, let's get some Premier League experience in to keep us up. So they've tried that. If they'd gone for 3 non-Premier League players, the fans would all be saying, well, they should have had somebody who's got experience. So they can't win with that. But Ayew, I like him, and the Palace fans were unhappy that he left, and they still sing his name because he works. He does put a shift in, and I think he's one of the few that you can look at out there and go, do you know what, he's trying. De Cordova-Reid has not got the pace. He might have the ability, but he's just not making a difference. And Skip, you're right. What's the point of spending that money on a player who's not come in to play? So it is really frustrating. But what can we do in January? Half the Premier League's bought no one. It's a dreadful time to buy. You pay over the odds, like Ipswich have done from the lad from Villa. They've paid more than they paid in the summer, and he's not had an assist or a goal for Villa, and Ipswich have desperately paid more. Our fans would soon be on the back of Rudkin if we paid more money for a player who got no goals and assists. So, what is out there? People know you're desperate. They put the prices up. Clubs don't want to let players go halfway through the season, and we don't want to make a mistake. But, what's happened to our academy? We used to always produce somebody every year. We've had all this money spent on the training ground. I watched Arsenal yesterday with 2 academy players out there ripping it up. Why don't we ever give any of these younger lads a go? It just seems to be we just cannot do it. Don't know why. So you've got an academy bringing nothing through, and then you've got transfer signings that are just not working. It's not good.
You hinted at it there that maybe the transfer strategy, and we'll talk more about strategy in a minute, but was to bring in Premier League experienced players that would help get the club over the line to safety as quickly as possible, because they've been there and they've done it. Jordan Ayew was at Palace for a long time, long before they were in the same position that they are now, with Guéhi and Eze playing at the top end of the pitch, and Mateta, who just can't stop scoring. Is this Premier League squad good enough for Leicester City to survive?
It's a good question.
If it remains as it is now with no more incomings.
Yeah, because I think there's too much. I think there's still a lot wrong with tactics. We don't ever change the formation. We just do the same thing every time. You look at Forest and they're playing like Leicester 2016. They have 30% possession and score 7 goals. They've got 2 wingers. They know how they're playing. They've got a big man up front. We just haven't got that. We thought when Ruud came in that there might be a bit of identity, but actually there isn't any identity in there. We've got 2 players were allowed on loan from the Premier League, so we've brought in a dud who doesn't even get in the squad, and we've got in Buenanate, who the fans love because of his early performances, but he's not getting in, and I can actually see a little bit of why he doesn't get in, because he's a yellow card waiting to happen. He does try passes which perhaps we should be a bit more extravagant, and he tries it and fails them, and the turnover comes back onto us. So from a manager watching him, I can understand the frustration, but from a fan point of view, we need everything we can, and we've got 2 loans there that are not playing for the club. Well, that's bad.
Pipes, I'll ask the same question to you. If there is no more incomings between now and 11 o'clock, which, as we say, we understand to be very, very likely indeed. In fact, Leicester City may well already be done in this transfer window. Is this squad good enough to stay in the Premier League?
Well, I look at the Wolves squad, because it is going to be 3 out of 4, I think now, and Wolves is basically the other side. I think we're better than the 2 below us. I don't think we're better than Wolves. No, that's wrong in saying that. I don't think we'll get more points than Wolves. I look at that Wolves team. Defensively, they're better than us, I think, and they can score goals, and they've got 1 or 2 real special players, as long as they don't lose them in the next 4 hours, because I know a lot of teams want a couple of their players. So, yeah, I mean, I knew it was going to be a struggle, but I've spoke about this a lot. The way you can bridge the gap is by having, that hunger and desire. And the more games you see like that Everton one, the more your faith starts to wane. And then we get the Tottenham performance and you're like, see, this team can do it. They can come from behind. They can show a bit of hunger and fight and determination. And that can bridge the gap even against the better sides in the Premier League. And that's why it's baffling to me when you see a performance like the Everton one, especially off the back of the Tottenham one. And the thing that I start to think is, I said after that Tottenham game, the best thing the club can go and do now is go and make a signing. Go and get, the players excited, bit of fresh blood into the side, keep up Van Nistelrooy on side. It seemed to me what happened is, he's got told middle of the week, listen, Ruud, PSR, mate, it don't look like we're going to be able to be. More than likely spat his dummy out. This is not what I signed for the club and got told. All of a sudden, all that energy, all that negative energy that he's got off the back of that transmits to the training ground. And then all of a sudden, you got a lot of moping around players, managers, staff. And that's what that performance looked like against Everton, didn't it? You don't get out the traps, you don't start well. After a great week like the week before, it don't really make any sense. So then you start trying to figure out in your head, what could have this week looked like to get a performance like that? And that would be my guess.
Paul, the PSR hangover that the club seemingly have been going through now for quite a while, and actually I'm not sure that the new UEFA version of things is going to help clubs at that stage. It will certainly make them have to pay lower wages going forward, which for Leicester City is probably not going to be that bad of a thing. But because of how close they are to the edge, clearly, that it is a spend what you get in from players in this transfer window. And with the inability to sign players in the summer, a much easier transfer window because of what was hanging over at the time. Are you, I don't want to say pleased, but I wonder where you stand on the club acting in what appears to be a more sensible, measured way than other clubs might do in the Premier League at the moment?
Not really. I mean, we did it when we went down last time, didn't we? Because there was no signings, as we slowly slid out of the league. So I think there's a massive frustration within the fan base, and I think I'm fair to say this on behalf of most, that this PSR thing, the fans want to know more about it. And I know football clubs don't really talk about this, but, I think the Leicester City fans have been through a lot with this, and it's just history repeating itself. And what is going on? What is going on with this situation? Have we got money or not? We're told when Van Nistelrooy joins that he's got money to spend. It's there now. It's not been spent. You can understand the fans' frustration. If we go down, well, I don't think we'd come back as easy as we did before. And I think that's the big fear here. And what is the penalty then? So what if we push on? What is it, 6 points or something? It's weighing up that gamble. We should be staying in the Premier League. And if we're going to have a 6-point deduction next year, then I'd rather start in the Premier League -6 than start in the Championship.
And the finances of staying in the Premier League, particularly this year with the new TV deal and everything rolling around, the sponsorships would be massive as well. But the club seemingly have money, but it won't improve the squad. So there's
how much money have they got then? They've obviously not got much, and I don't know. There's just, unfortunately, we're a very private club, but there's a lot gone wrong in recent years in the club, and the fan base hasn't got the faith at the moment in the people running the club that they're running it correctly. And there's obviously a huge fear within the fan base and respect for the owners that no one wants to criticise them. But somebody somewhere is not running this club correctly. And whether that's Rudkin, Whelan, whatever, but the management at Leicester City, and I mean the overall management, not necessarily the manager, is not running this club correctly. And that is the fans' frustration. And we can all see us slipping out of this league again without any fight. And that's the point. There's no fight. If we saw those players fighting, that's half the battle. They'll get clapped off. But they don't deserve it. They're not fighting for us. And it feels like, I don't know, it just feels like there's an apathy amongst the management of Leicester City that, meh. That's what it feels like. And that frustrates the fans. And that's why there's protests.
Well, the January transfer window closes tonight. We will bring you a When You're Smiling extra on the podcast with all the details of any late incomings or outgoings once the deadline comes at 11 p.m.